Hello everybody, thanks for connecting and welcome to our Impact Talk, Tomorrow's Philanthropy. My name is Renate and I have the pleasure to be one of the co-founders of the Geneva Macro Labs. I will be moderating this Impact Talk today together with my colleague Marianne, who will be directing the Q&A session. Most of you know the Geneva Macro Labs already. We are a do tank that brings leading minds together from the public sector, the private sector, from civil society in order to support sustainable development goals. You can find more information about us on our website and in our last interview with the UN Today magazine. Our impact talks are supposed to inform impact standards and influence the sustainability discussion so that we don't have to invent the sustainability debate over and over again. As a frequent webinar participant, you might be aware that it's important to be muted if you are not presenting. Also, feel free to switch off your video if you don't want to be seen in the video that we are recording tonight. And as already mentioned, please leave us a note from where you dialed in today, because we want to see how international our audience is. What's on the agenda tonight? We will have a look at how donors shape a better world, as well as at the future of philanthropy. There will be 2 Q&A sessions where we invite you to ask your questions. You can post your questions already during the presentations, and we will address them during the Q&A sessions. We have the pleasure to listen to 3 experts today who spend their days trying to make the world of philanthropy better, all approaching it from different angles, using different methods and approaches. They are going to share how they do that, why is it of such value, and what their views are on the future of philanthropy. One of our speakers is Christoph Courth. Christoph is the Global Head of Philanthropy Services at the wealth manager Pictet. Christoph joined Pictet back in September after 5 years with UBS, more recently in Los Angeles, heading up the family and philanthropy advisory offering across the West Coast of the United States. Prior to becoming a philanthropy advisor, Christoph worked in the nonprofit world for over a decade in Africa, the Middle East, the UK, and the Caribbean. Welcome, Christoph. Our second speaker is Laetitia Gill. Laetitia is the Executive Director of the Geneva Center for Philanthropy at the University of Geneva. With a master's degree in management, Laetitia Gill is recognized as an expert in the field of social innovation, corporate social responsibility, and philanthropy. With a background both in the private and the nonprofit sector, she has 15 years of experience in partnerships. As one of the directors of the new Diploma of Advanced Studies of Philanthropy, she co-designed the program of this new executive education program at the University of Geneva. Welcome, Laetitia. Our third speaker is Giuseppe Ugazio. He is the Edmond de Rothschild Assistant Professor in Behavioral Philanthropy at the Geneva Finance Research Institute. He is a scientist studying the neuropsychological mechanisms that drive our complex human social behaviors. Giuseppe is using interdisciplinary experimental methods to probe the affective, cognitive, and behavioral control mechanisms that support our social decision-making. I'm delighted to now open the floor for today's discussion and hand over to my colleague Marianne and to our speakers.
Thank you, Renate. As you have mentioned in our welcoming words today, we would like to start with this discussion today by looking at the question, how donors shape a better world. A few words before, the Global Impact Investing Network estimated that over 1,720 organizations manage $715 billion in impact investing as of the end of 2019. And now we can see that the number of philanthropic institutions have skyrocketed this century. In Europe and North America, more than 40% of foundations were established in this century. And now in the past 3 years, we have seen a shift away from traditional one-off donations to live communities and also large crowdfunding campaigns. Now, given this impressive market size, the question is that we asked, how can we better address challenges of today and turn innovative ideas into lasting system-level change? And for that reason, I would like to turn first to Giuseppe, to you. You are a professor in behavioral philanthropy at the Geneva Finance Research Institute at the University of Geneva. And you use behavioral sciences to better characterize philanthropic behavior, and you work also at the crossroads, right, between neuroscience and economics. So philanthropic giving is becoming more and more important for educational equity, for sustainable finance, and also the sustainable development goals that are so important for us as think tank. Could you share with us your thoughts around philanthropic efficiency? So what do you think is the most pressing and also long-term issue with philanthropy that needs to be addressed in order to make philanthropy more efficient? What's your take?
Thank you so much for your kind introductions. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you today. And it's a fantastic question, Marianne. As you described the spectrum of the actors engaged in promoting the well-being of societies is no longer anymore only philanthropy. That's been so for over 20 years now. But every day that passes is more so, right? We have many more actors every day, new figures, new instruments that are created to address the SDGs. The SDGs themselves are a great instrument that gives us a very good target. So that basically a framework in which everybody can sort of cooperate and work together to make the world a better place. But as the complexity and the number of agents increases that are working towards the same goal, so does the need for collaboration, for cooperation. And to me, it's really surprising to see how philanthropy, but also other actors, I imagine sustainable investments, I can think, even in the impact investing sector, in other endeavors in AI for good, we have all these actors, but they're sort of all going by themselves, right? All down their road. However, if we take a sort of a helicopter view, we see that all these roads are sort of crossing each other, but we don't know how and why. So for me, the most pressing issue that we face at the moment in order to make not only philanthropy, but any endeavor to make the world better, more efficient, it's to create a database, create somehow a big data that can tell us who is working on what and using which methods. So as you mentioned before, we don't want everybody to constantly reinvent the wheel, but let's just see which wheels are around and build on those. And so just to mention, in the realm of philanthropy, in our research, we started by looking at this. Basically, we wanted to ask the question of why do people engage in philanthropy and what in Switzerland? And we saw that there was very little to answer this question available, right? So one option would have been then to just go and ask each philanthropic organization or each philanthropist and ask her or, what's the organization doing? But an alternative would have been instead to just take data that is already out there, but not sort of in one data set. So we looked at the registry of all the foundations at the federal level, where there are a couple of repositories where you can find all the mission statements from all the organizations. And we collected all this, created a huge data set with more than 13,000 mission statements. And now we're applying artificial intelligence algorithms based on natural language processing to try to find patterns, try to find who is working on what are the methods that are used, what are the SDGs that are most commonly addressed. And just to give you the sort of a quick answer, and it's also not surprising, we're seeing that education and health are the two SDGs that are tackled the most, but there are some that are almost neglected by most of, at least in the mission statements, right? That we know they're not the perfect source of information of what organizations do, but they're largely absent from the philanthropic activities. So that's the short-term issue, and the sort of mid-long term, to answer completely the question, is how can we then generate, break the silos and generate better collaboration. And in this direction, we're working together with the state of Geneva and the CERN to develop a tool that is basically a matchmaking tool, or a tool that can help visualize who's working on what, and all these networks that are really complex because of the size of organizations, so that we can hopefully help people find partners and understand better what's been already done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Giuseppe. That was very interesting. You kind of alluded to the point that better philanthropy not only builds on the lessons learned on the motivation side, but also embraces, in a way, new schemes that reflect specific social purpose of invested money. And such deliberation leads as well to the second speaker tonight. And I would like to address myself to you, Laetitia. Laetitia, as Renate mentioned, you are the executive director of the University of Geneva's Center for Philanthropy, and you are known as an expert in the field of social innovation, etc., CSR and philanthropy. So we can kind of define philanthropy like a fluid concept, right? It depends on from which angle we look at philanthropy, at this practice. Now, new fields arose such as strategic philanthropy, but also systemic philanthropy. And the call, I would say, for a better linkage between intentions and the outcomes becomes much louder. According to you, what do you think is the core mission of philanthropy today?
Yes, so thank you very much, Marianne. I would like to step back to start with just to define maybe philanthropy, because we are speaking about it, but we haven't taken the time yet. So it has, as you already know, Greek origin, with philanthrop, philos for love, and anthropos for humanity. So we consider that this is historically the love for humanity. Now at the Geneva Center for Philanthropy, we have decided to define it as voluntary contributions. By contributions, it means human, financial, pro bono, skills. So voluntary contributions for the public good being codified in the Agenda 2030 for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that once we have the definition, now we can think about, I can talk about the mission of philanthropy today. As Giuseppe explained, we are in a more and more complex world facing multi-crises, and the philanthropy sector has for a long time seen as, because there are a lot of volunteering people, as a small sector apart. But we saw that there were, and the COVID-19 crisis showed us that the sector was proved that could be very agile and complementary to the other main stakeholders, which are the state and the corporate sector. So taking this into consideration, we need to be sure to be skilled, to have the right people, to face, and the right leaders. And this is, I think, an issue for the philanthropy sector, because we have many small organizations depending the region of the world. But when we look at Switzerland and many other countries in Europe, it's not the same size as in the US, for instance, or China. So at the Geneva Center for Philanthropy was established almost 4 years ago. I am the executive director. Professor Henry Peter is the head of the center. And we decided to tackle philanthropy with an interdisciplinary scope. It means that it's not within a faculty, but we work with, when we speak about philanthropy, we know that we speak, why do people give? As Giuseppe said, we speak about ethics, financial, economics. So to come back on your point, we thought that the mission of philanthropy was to be very professional and needed more, as I say, more research and more skills. Because if I ask today, everybody here, you are involved in philanthropy, but no one has a university diploma in philanthropy. Not yet, it's coming. And so the mission of the center is to encourage research, education, and events. I could go further, but really the mission today is to equip, to be agile, to answer all the challenges of the society. But for that, we need people who are trained, and we need also research, because so many times, when we speak about philanthropy, we speak about emotion, we speak about love, and sometimes we need and more about how and less about why. And I think that we have to step back and to think about, why do I do that? Is it I am altruistic? Is it opportunistic? So it's not good and bad reasons, but we need to think about the why before the how. And I think it's what is missing at the moment. So, and also teaching, and I think we'll speak later about it, but we decided with Giuseppe and Daniel, we are all three co-directors of the new DAS, which offer the 360 degrees. And the success we see among the participants is that for once, it's an interdisciplinary approach looking to the future.
Thank you, Laetitia. I think a key word that you just mentioned is interdisciplinarity, right? You highlighted the importance of interdisciplinarity when we talk about the mission of philanthropy. Thank you. Christoph, turning over to you now. You're head of philanthropy services at the private bank Pictet, an investment-led service company. You offer at your bank a comprehensive service for wealthy individuals and families. Now, your task is helping your clients to be as impactful as possible with the philanthropic capital. Could you explain to our audience why a bank such as Pictet is in the need of someone like you? What's the importance? What importance does it have for better philanthropy?
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me here today. It's and coming after Giuseppe and Laetitia, it's yeah, hard to follow. That's super interesting stuff. So maybe I'll flip the question, answer the second part first. You know, why I think my role is important, my role at Pictet and other wealth managers that have a position like mine. And obviously I'm biased, but yeah, that's obvious. But first of all, maybe I'll explain what it is that I actually do, because it's not always so clear. So I guess my role is essentially a philanthropy consultant, a philanthropy advisor, and I'm a free resource to Pictet clients to help them in any way I can with their philanthropy. Maybe they're just starting out. They've had a liquidity event or had a life-changing experience or a big inheritance, and they want to start, but they don't know how. They don't know where. They have questions like, where do I begin? What's the real need? What's the best approach? Or they're much more sophisticated, perhaps further down the line. They already have a foundation, lots of staff, 10, 20 years under the belt, but have other questions like, how do I scale my work? How do I collaborate? How do I fundraise? How do I measure my impact? How do I build an exit strategy for my work? And my role is really to be a partner to them, to help them work out what the best approach is, to help them navigate those questions and find the right answers and what works for them. And then perhaps I work with other colleagues around Pictet around the structuring of philanthropy, with other colleagues around building it into a family constitution so that this permeates down the generations. Or crucially with, the bankers and the ESG experts around that much larger pot of money, their investment capital, and how they can align that in a responsible way, invest it responsibly, sustainably, in a way that is mission aligned with what their philanthropy seeks to do, and is not working in direct competition, which historically has often been the case. So why is this needed? Well, the amount of times that I've met clients, I've met philanthropists who've said to me, Chris, I thought it would be easy to give my money away. But then as I started and the more I got into it, I felt like Alice in Wonderland going down this rabbit warren and getting lost, and it became more and more complicated. And I can see that. I think, yeah, sure, giving money away is simple. We can all do that. But giving it away in a strategic way that really achieves a social or environmental return, achieves impact, is not quite so straightforward. I'm not saying philanthropy is hard. I genuinely don't believe in most cases it is hard, but it does require time. Time to take a step back and think what it is that you want to do. Time to think what it is that you want to achieve, who the best partners are, what the best approach is, what resources you have that you can bring to the table, and time to see results. And ironically, obviously the one thing that wealthy people don't have in most instances is time. So that's where I come into play, to try and make it easier. So to the first part of the question, why does a wealth manager like Pictet have someone like me? I mean, if you think about it, I don't have targets, I don't sell products, I'm a cost center. In fact, I'm more than that. I'm actually giving assets away, which is a bit counterintuitive for a bank. But so why do they do it? I think the partners, Pictet, for those of you who don't know, Pictet is a multi-family owned organization, bank, private bank that's been operating for 200 years. And so they have time. Time is on their side. And I think the partners, the owning partners, looked at it as, they looked at statistics. 92% of high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals are engaged in philanthropy. There's over $1 trillion donated annually across the world. There's at least $1.5 trillion in foundations across the world. So there's pretty much all wealthy individuals are doing it in one way or another, wealthy families, I should say, and they're putting significant amounts of capital to work. And it's become ever more important for many reasons as we go forward. And I read a statistic the other day that 79% of millennials believe that it is their inheritors believe that it's their responsibility with that wealth to bring on philanthropy as well and to be engaged in philanthropy as well. And if you think about it, given that there's around $400 trillion of investable assets across the globe, and most of that wealth managers like Pictet are the custodians of. So that's a tremendous responsibility. And I think and a sort of collective from the wealth manager's perspective and roles like mine at some competitors that do have a similar role, we have a responsibility to help our clients invest those assets in a sustainable way that work in harmony with the planet that we live upon. And we also have a responsibility to help influence the wealth owners to use their philanthropic capital in a strategic, structured, and impactful way.
Thank you, Christoph. That was great, very enlightening, in particular, as you raised the question of impact measurement. But before we go into the details, I would like to give now first the audience the floor, and I'm handing over to Renate, who had an eye on the chat. Renate, what kind of questions?
I am ready for the questions, and I already have some good questions lined up. And I would like to ask Ellie Vafopoulou to speak out. Ellie, can you unmute yourself, please, and ask your question? Okay, then I will just read a question. Could philanthropy become a course at school for children? Laetitia.
I really like the question. It's a very good question. Altruism, we have it's spontaneous. It's something we have in our inner. Everybody was born with altruism, I think, but it's like a muscle. You need to train it a little bit. And at university, so we are not looking at the school, but there is a very good initiative by the Fondation Edmond Rothschild in France, and now they try to expand in Europe, called the École de la Philanthropie, and where they teach they teach children at school from 7 to 11, and to be philanthropists. And what I like in their approach, they do it at school, and the children they learn, so they can choose a cause, and they're really, and it's not about money. And I think that when you remember when I defined the philanthropy concept, I say that it's voluntary contribution. It can be money, but not only money. And sometimes I like to speak rather than about philanthropists, about engaged people. And the School of Philanthropy, it's running in a state school, private school and state school in France, and it's such a big success because children, they learn, they like it, and they really get a good input. And also we know that if they learn it by 7, and we encourage them to give, it's something they got for life. It's like volunteers. We know that volunteers at adult age are mostly people who are engaged or scouts, in their early age. So that's something we would very much encourage. Unfortunately, I'm at university, but I would love to have this initiative in Switzerland.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laetitia. Giuseppe.
I gave a talk last Friday to with a friend who is running the e-club of Rotary in Silicon Valley, and he connected me to a bunch of teachers who actually are running such programs of philanthropy for kids, and they want to get more insights on how to, how to evaluate philanthropy, how to motivate people, and so on. So there are lots of initiatives starting there, and I completely agree with Laetitia that starting young just makes people aware that that they can do something, and it's actually breaking the barrier of the misconception of what philanthropy is, right? Even when I start my bachelor course at the university and I ask for some example of philanthropists, the name that comes up is Bill Gates, or someone else who is the billionaire who gives to the opera, more or less, right? That's the concept of philanthropists we have, but philanthropy is much more than that. And just by engaging directly the kids, and even at younger adults or older adults, we can really show that philanthropy is more than that, and it's actually easier. To refer back to what Christoph was saying, philanthropy is complicated, but the first step is really easy, right? You can really make a difference with small actions. So it's great to engage kids in this work.
Yeah, can I jump in on that? Because
Sure.
I'm really passionate about this topic as well. I think that's a great question, and I love those answers. When in LA, when I was in LA not too long ago, my kids were in school, and they were actually being taught a program that was founded by Jeff Weiner, who's the former CEO of LinkedIn, and it's his philanthropy project, and he's doing it with another gentleman whose name I've forgotten. But it's all about training teachers and giving them a syllabus to teach kids empathy. So not strictly philanthropy, but teaching children, very young children, mine are 5 and 7, about how to be empathetic, how to care for others, how to care for the world, and which is obviously a precursor to being philanthropic. And I think that is such an important thing, to bring up children being empathetic and caring about everything beyond themselves. So yeah, great question.
Absolutely. Thank you also, Christoph. Martina Fahn, you have another question. Would you like to speak out and ask a question?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. And I'm dialing in from the United States, where donor-advised funds have been growing just exponentially. I don't know what the situation is in Europe, if there's the similar growth in that front. A lot of nonprofits run into barriers accessing that money. Of course, the donor gets the tax benefit as soon as they park their money with the community foundation or the bank. So for them, it's basically, from a financial standpoint, a done deal. The community foundation itself has an interest in maintaining certain levels of funding. And I just have to wonder how we can enable nonprofits to access that money, so it's not just sitting there.
So who wants to go first and answer these questions? We have like 2-3 minutes, and then we go back to the presentation.
I'm happy to. Yeah, the donor advised funds are huge in the US, absolutely huge. And I remember working when I was over there. I was working for another wealth management firm, UBS, and I would come across. I was working with financial advisors, and I'd come across donor advised funds that some of the clients had, and they would have significant amounts of money in. I mean, 17 million, 20 million. And the financial advisor would tell me that in some instances they just hadn't touched it because there's no mandatory payout that they need, and it's a great sort of so what I thought my role was to sort of help them give it away, and they were just sitting on it because philanthropy, going back to this point, the philanthropy can be a bit challenging because they need the time, and if they don't have the time, they just leave it when it comes to donor advised funds. They don't have to pay it out. But if someone comes along and helps make it easier for them to give it away, then hopefully it goes. But for I think in the US, I wouldn't be surprised if there was more legislation around mandatory payout rates and a bit more transparency around donor advised funds. I think here in Europe, it's slightly different and slightly, ever so slightly more transparent in some countries, perhaps less so in Switzerland. But yeah, those are pots that are hard to access, and there's less transparency.
Very good. We will be addressing the other questions during the next Q&A session. I'm now handing back to Marianne for the next block of questions for our speakers.
Thank you, Renate. Yeah, so what we are going to do now is to kind of spotlight the future of philanthropy. I would like to refer to the Global Philanthropy Report from Harvard that kind of provides us with a nice summary of which forces are kind of driving the sector's rapid expansion. And global economic growth and the enormous increase in private wealth accumulation is one of these factors, but also we can see, and this comes up in many UN reports, a persistent economic and social inequality challenge in many areas that are addressed in the SDGs. Now, philanthropic institutions span the globe, and just check the numbers, there are today more than 260,000 foundations around the world. But when we look into the future, what kind of trends can we see? And Christoph, I'm turning first to you. Given your experience working with many philanthropists in the past, which trends do you see emerging? In other words, how do you think will philanthropy change for the future?
Yeah, thank you, Marianne. And this is a good question for me, I think. So I've literally just finished writing a short paper on that was titled "The Future of Philanthropy." So in it, I highlight 7 trends that I think are going to become ever more pronounced over the coming years, they've been sort of sped up as a direct result of the turmoil that we've had this past 18 months. And I'm more than happy to share that paper with anyone who's interested, but I don't have time to go through it today. But to give some thoughts, I think for many years now, there's been a steady trend towards a more strategic, more collaborative, more outcomes-focused approach to philanthropy, and a move away from perhaps the more traditional benefactor, beneficiary style giving of the past. You know, today a younger, more tech-nurtured, globally active generation are taking over the reins of the world's wealth. And to Laetitia's point around what is philanthropy, you know, these individuals, this younger generation, I think the term philanthropy is perhaps less, that perhaps don't relate to it quite as much as their parents did. They perhaps see themselves more as activists or social impact investors or whatever it may be. And you know, that wealth isn't being generated just in Europe and in the US like in the past. It's, you know, right across Latin America, right across Africa, lots in Asia. And they're bringing a different approach to, a different flavor, a different viewpoint to a more modern version of philanthropy that we think of. But if I look at and think about the conversations that I've been having over the past 18 months and how things have sort of changed, I think we're going to look at this period as being a truly defining moment in philanthropy. You know, the far-reaching tentacles of the COVID-19 induced global crisis that really swept the world incredibly quickly, impacting every facet of our lives, you know, created created new and amplified existing issues, social issues, but it's also ever further highlighted the environmental issues and challenges and our impact on the world that for too long we've evidently ignored. And this topic of our environment and protecting our shared environment, biodiversity, combating climate change, I think will only grow exponentially. I mean, but there's a lot of room to grow. I mean, in 2019, statistics were that roughly only 2% of global philanthropy was spent on combating climate change. And I think, you know, this isn't my words, I think pretty much majority of scientists say that climate change is the most defining challenge of our time. And, you know, in the words of one philanthropist, I can't remember who said it, but he said, all philanthropy is essentially for nothing if we don't have a world fit for living in, which I thought was very powerful. So I think not only will more capital flow towards these topics in this space, I think we'll see more philanthropists adopting a climate lens to their existing work, which may not be strictly climate related. And indeed also with their investments, going back to that point, you know, historically the process of investments were very different to the process of giving it away. They were completely indistinct. And you know, one has a sole focus on financial return, the other a sole focus on social or environmental return or impact. But you know, today with the opportunities that are available and you know, responsible investing, sustainable investing, impact investing, it's pretty much mainstream. And to give an example, I'm not doing a pitch, but just because I know it, there's a fund at Pictet called the Global Environmental Opportunities Fund, which is based on the framework of the Stockholm Resilience Center's 7 planetary boundaries. So it's super awesome. There's actually a Netflix program at the moment with David Attenborough called Planetary Breaking Boundaries or something like that. Really interesting. But anyway, I'm going off the point. Yeah, so this fund has tripled in size over the past year. Another one, another clean energy fund, tripled in size as investors flock to sort of move their investments into sort of more planetary and environmentally sound investments, which I thought was incredibly interesting. And I know I'm running out of time. So finally, another thing I think is we're going to see ever more big gifts, mega gifts, systems change size gifts coming out. You know, from I think we have some people from India on the line. Azim Premji's donations in 2019, $1 billion donations to his foundation. From the US, you know, the phenomenal Mackenzie Scott and her $6 billion at the end of last year, her further $3 billion at the beginning of this year. So I think we're going to see more of that and see more, and on the other side, nonprofits being more ambitious, more audacious, more collaborative in their funding asks and their solutions. And as with, back to Mackenzie Scott, the way that she gave her money is I think quite a defining one, and I think philanthropy going forward is going to be much more flexible in its gifting, less directive, and granted with fewer restrictions. So just to close, I think in many respects, I think COVID-19 has really sort of sped up the arrival of a new era in philanthropy, one that is defined by a sense of urgency, a sense of immediacy, and responsible participation in this fast-changing, completely interconnected world.
Thank you, Christoph. You provided us with really an interesting outlook towards the structure of philanthropy and also the trend towards more collaboration, if I understand you correctly. And you also highlighted that kind of the change is arising through a new generation that is stepping in particular when it comes to environment-focused funds. So that would be interesting to see how we're evolving on that part. When you take a closer look at the people behind tomorrow's philanthropy, what picture, Laetitia, would you draw about the future actors in that field?
And to what Christoph has already very well said, I would say new actors or different actors, new or different tools as well, and new way of doing. So new actors, you know, in the past it was mainly individuals who spent their life in the private sector and wanted to give back. But they started to be philanthropists or engaged or activists, whatever we want to say, not before 50 or 60 years old. Now what we see is that people that start a business and they have already a CSR strategy, a philanthropic engagement, whatever, but in parallel to their career. Their career may not be that successful or very successful, but it's included in their professional path. So also so there are the traditional foundations, but we can also re-question about this vehicle. For instance, in Switzerland, is not that flexible. If you want to change the status, it's very difficult. So it's a very good tool, but it might be the only tool for the future. We see more and more hybrid entities, and the Geneva Center for Philanthropy is working on it. We're preparing an international conference on social entrepreneurship for 2022, because we are convinced that social entrepreneurs, as they have a role to play, and also the corporate sector, companies, to achieve the SDGs in 9 years' time, we can't do without corporate sector, the companies. So, and sometimes we forget about it. And so Henry Peters, the head of the GCP, like to provoke to say companies are the new philanthropists. I like it in a way, because I think that we can't deal without them through their foundation, corporate foundations, or through their engagement. So it was about the actors. Now my second point was about the tools. I think that we haven't spoken yet about it, but it's a financial initiatives. So we are in Geneva, we are a hub for philanthropy, but also a hub for sustainable finance. And there will be a big forum in end of November called Building Bridges to find solutions to match philanthropic initiative and financial solutions. And if we take, I see that Romain Zappella from RCRC is online, the example of the humanitarian impact bonds. This is a new tool that attract other people. And like Professor Alex Admont, Professor of Finance, say, it's to grow the pie. To grow the pie in a way that is, we are not speaking of giving less, but adding more into the pie. So I think that social impact bonds, for instance, are an illustration of new financial tool can help, for the philanthropy of tomorrow. And also, last but not least, as the approach, how you do it. Christoph explained it, and I think that I used to be a secretary general for a group of philanthropists, 20 philanthropists, and who are successful at least in their professional life. And for me, the big success was when they were transformed, because they came with the idea to give, or just give money. And I told them, no, I would like you to come and visit the project with me. And then when they saw the reality, on the field, the resources and all the social innovation that was on the field, they realized, they could learn from them. And I think that's key. For me, it was key, because then it's much more balanced. It's not, it's a much more balanced relationship. And so many times NGO can look at the founder or the grant maker, asking money, instead of thinking, oh, I have so much advance, about social innovation, or I have a solution, and be more balanced. So, and so as Mackenzie Scott did very recently, to focus, to support NGOs such as, I would name, Ashoka, for instance, on system change. That's key. In a way, she says, I trust you guys, I trust you. That's it. I don't want any impact report and whatever. If you have the good leadership, the good people, the good resources, it's your job now. And so over to you now. But
thank you. I think there were many golden nuggets, which all of the three of you shared. And it kind of complements your points. In particular, the question of how can we come to real system change, right? You mentioned system change comes along with trust and a certain resilience to the obstacles that might arise. I would like to address a last question to you, Giuseppe. I'm very excited about it, because I'm myself a sociologist, and I've been focusing in my PhD research on decision sciences. And I'm very curious to hear from you, if you could share with the audience how you believe human decisions and beliefs concerning philanthropic charity will look like in the future. And as a professor who lectures about behavioral aspects of philanthropy, what would be your take?
Well, thank you so much for the question, Marianne. And maybe you should answer it yourself, given your vision size. I think you could probably answer it in better than me. But Just to give you a quick example of what the behavioral science can tell us, right? We know climate change has been around forever and nothing has been done for a long time. And only now we're picking up pace, even if perhaps even too slowly, right? But that's something that we are too good at doing is, procrastinating or not really sensing we're not wanting to incur a small cost today that could bring a large benefit only in the future, right? In behavioral economics, we have this tasks that are called the intertemporal choice task, where you can ask people whether you prefer a smaller amount of money today or wait X time for a much larger amount of money. And you find that people are strongly preferring the option today, right? Even if it's not in their interest. And I think this can really explain why we are so bad at reacting when we can imagine something good in the future. Say, the same with dieting or going to the gym. That's good in the long term, but it's a cost we have to pay today. And that's just to link it to what Christoph was saying about climate change, right? And we saw instead in the philanthropic world, now when we get sort of dropped in the boiling water with a pandemic, how quickly so many foundations, so many organizations repurpose their funds, repurpose their initiatives just to tackle this very pressing need of dealing with this new situation, right? So when we really are confronted right now with something that's immediate, then we're much more reactive to the situation. And it's a bit also in general, one of the dilemmas of philanthropy is that too often, if we were to invest, say, 10 today, we could prevent having to invest 100 in, say, relieving a hurricane disaster in Haiti, right? Or, if we were to invest little today and have better infrastructure and prevent certain catastrophe to happen, it would be so much better. But then if we were, say, to convince people to donate today or to invest resources in prevention, people are much less likely to feel the drive and the need to engage in something that is not as emotional and as impactful as reacting to a catastrophe that already occurred. So this is kind of where I think behavioral science can hold sort of the key to help people really be proactive. And I think this bonds, the social impact bonds that Laetitia was mentioning, other instruments that are being created go in this direction, right? Can we really have sort of a bulk of money that is already started to use today to prevent very bad things to happen tomorrow? And there are, at the behavioral level, individual level, other mechanisms, I think, of pre-commitment or other strategies that we can give to people so that they can act today, anticipate, understanding today what they believe is good, and sort of feel this empathy gap or this emotional gap that prevents them from acting. So there are some tools that we are now trying to test and see if we can leverage them to make people become better philanthropists.
Thank you, Giuseppe. I'm handing directly now over to Renate because you have been watching the Q&A chat and would like to give you now the floor again.
Thank you, Marianne. I have a question from Ramanujam. Would you like to unmute, please, and ask your question?
Yeah. Thank you. It's a very, very important webinar because right now, because of this pandemic crisis and also the growing dangers from environmental degeneration and climate change, poor children and persons with disabilities, they are the worst affected in most countries. And I am speaking from the context of India. Because of the pandemic, in many states, which are provinces within India, there is a compulsion for the children, school children, to learn through online. Now, the dilemma is those children who are well off, they have smartphones and they can also get some kind of internet, whether they are in urban areas or rural areas. But the poor children who go to the government schools, they don't learn anything for the last 18 months. And the teachers are well paid, but they say unless the classes are open, we have nothing to do, we cannot teach. Now, the whole problem is to have access to the smartphone and the internet. Now, somehow the governments don't show much interest, but some of us who are active in promoting online education to cover the poor sections, whether it is at the school level or the higher education level, we find it extremely difficult to mobilize financial assistance. That's one question. The second question is, under pandemic, persons with disabilities have been almost forgotten. In spite of the UN declarations and appeals, they don't get any kind of assistance. They have to fend for themselves by confining themselves to their own homes. They cannot move out because of the safety and all. Now, on that, we don't know how to manage even the basic facilities, including medical facilities for persons with disabilities. So these are the two concerns I have. And if you could throw some light as to how philanthropy can step in, I'll be glad.
So who wants to take this question about the online, the possibilities to learn offline about philanthropy and other topics?
I think this is a big challenge, not only in India, even in Italy. We saw today there was a report on by the Invalsi, this agency that tracks the progress of kids, and showing that due to the pandemic and restrictions, there is a huge gap between inequality of education. So it's a really tough problem to solve, right? Because for most of us, it's so simple to, most of us in this room, right? It's just so simple to just connect and switch to virtual, but then this is not possible in other places. However, it's also true that once we bridge the hardware sort of issue, and hopefully with donations, or even better by building capacity on how to build maybe cheap options for smartphones, or new technologies. I can think in Africa with this SMS banking. You can through technology you can really reach a lot of people, and then you could. I know of several initiatives of universities in the US. I'm not sure if University of Geneva is also participating, where the courses offered, they're just open to anyone, right? And especially in people in developing countries, that maybe their universities are not prepared to give online classes, so these students can follow other universities' courses. So it's a kind of a trade-off, or it's sort of some opportunities on one hand, but then barriers that when you're already in difficulty and you get a pandemic, gets even very large obstacles. So I think the answer there most likely is to try to sponsor grassroots movements, try to get people on the ground to do capacity building there, and try to not have to outsource or not to depend on others, especially on the charity of others, but actually through maybe impact investing or other alternatives are actually trying to generate the market and generate solution, and not just dropping donations, try to solve these issues. Of course, it's too late now for COVID-19, but hopefully we'll be better prepared than for the next time if more people engage in this.
Thank you, Giuseppe.
And I can just mention, yes, I know that the OECD 2 years ago, I think, published a report on philanthropy in India through CSR, because, depending on the law in India, and corporations have to give back. But so I can send you the link right now. You will be able to see. And as Giuseppe say, I think that to give access to many of them, and it's what we do at the DCP at another level, but all our courses, academic courses, are free, available, everybody can attend, and it's something that we realized that when we started the courses 4 years ago, so it's done for students, obviously, but we are surprised by how many practitioners decided to join. And so it's something, and it wasn't through online, it wasn't online, you know, it was physical. And I think the more we can open the system to everybody, the better it will be.
Thank you, Laetitia. I have a question from Francesca. Would you like to ask your question, please? And unmute yourself.
Here I am. I managed to unmute. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for this great webinar, first of all.
Thank you.
I would have one question, maybe for Pictet or for all the others great speakers. And if according to their experience, we can use philanthropic funds to de-risk social projects that sometimes are very challenging, but they have a high positive impact. And if philanthropic funds can be used to de-risk these projects and thus attract private investors towards socially impactful projects. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that's where philanthropy really performs at its best, and how they can work together in the best possible way, the philanthropic capital and the investment capital. I mean, philanthropy is the ultimate risk capital in a way. I mean, if you think about it, corporate aid budgets or corporate CSR budgets and government aid budgets are they're responsible to their electorate or to their shareholders. So they have short-term horizons. They need to see results. Whereas philanthropy, they don't really have that. You know, they're not answerable to anyone. So it is the ultimate risk capital. So yeah, and in particularly with the question that was before, you know, with the digital divide, that could be a great example of philanthropists coming in, taking a risk with their philanthropic capital and investing in a small social enterprise that I don't know, has sort of technology solution, and to test it. And if it works, then, you know, maybe impact investors come along to take it to scale, or a government comes along to take it to scale. And so, yeah, I think, and they can work really well together, hand in hand. And again, we're doing another paper with my head of ESG colleague on exactly that. And I think that the latest Stiftungs's report or the Swiss Foundation's report that came out had a great few articles on that, which, yeah, you should have a look at.
Thank you, Christoph. So we have the time for a last 30-second statement from each speaker, and I would like to ask Laetitia to start.
No, I think it's all about system change, but we are part of the system. So we have also, before looking at my neighbors, you know, I should ask myself, you know, what can I start to change at my level? And I think the discussions see that we are very skilled people when I look at my colleague, you know, today. So it's very encouraging, but we have to be part of it and also to lead this system change.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Laetitia. Giuseppe, what's your last 30-second statement?
So for me, the important thing is to really demystify philanthropy, make philanthropy something that is an everyday practice. And as we know, you know, very little actions every day can make a real difference. And I think when we manage to, you know, make philanthropy a habit, then we can also have time then to engage in making it more efficient. So we can think about how can we shape, you know, our decisions to contribute to philanthropy to actually maximize the impact we want to achieve. Or we can really rationalize what's the way we do philanthropy. But the first step is really to make doing philanthropy a habit of ours.
Very good. That's also my opinion. Christoph, your statement.
Can I say what they said? I don't really have something inspirational. I think one thing, philanthropy is all about collaboration and supporting each other and working together and sharing things at the non-profit level, but also at the philanthropist level. So at this level, just to say, if I can be helpful in any way, I'll put my email address in the chat. please reach out. And thank you, Marianne and Renate, for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Thank you very much, Giuseppe and Laetitia, last but not least. It was a very interesting and interactive webinar. I really appreciate all the questions and the exchange. Please stay in touch with us. There was a request to post the answers to the questions that couldn't be addressed on our YouTube channel. We will do that. Have a look at the comments. We will post the video shortly. In the meantime, stay in touch with us via different social media. You can find the URLs in the chat. Also, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, become a member of the Geneva Macro Lab so that we can have a bigger thought leader community. We are now having a summer break until September, but that doesn't mean that we are not available. So please reach out to us or hope to reconnect with you when we restart our webinars in September. Have a good summer, all the best, and stay healthy.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.